cover the print function as well as how to store variables and name variables. So the first things first, we left off earlier with strings, and we noticed that, remember, the string data types are just basically any sequence of characters that are surrounded by quotes. Now, what happens if we actually run this program? So if you look to your top left of your computer, you should see that on the idle tab, you have the Run tab, and all you have to do is click on the Run module. And when we run the module, notice how in the Python shell, we get the next line, basically. And so what happened was that Python went through your text editor, read the program, and basically executed whatever was inside of this file. And now the problem with this is that you don't really see anything here, right? There is no output. There is no result from your program. And the reason why is because all you have inside of your file here is just two strings. And Python has read these two strings, but there's nothing for it to actually do. So what we do in Python is actually use a print function to output any results onto the Python shell. So an example of this would be print hello world, okay, and click save. And if you run this module, now you should see the output that says hello world. And basically you were able to get this output because you specified to print that particular string. And a little bit about the print function. The print is a function that tells Python what we want it to do, and in this case we are saying to print whatever is inside of these parentheses. And the print function, all it does is it takes anything that's inside of these parentheses and prints it onto the Python shell, which is why you see it written here. And the print itself is a function. There are different types of functions that we'll cover as the videos go, but for this video, all you need to know is the print function. And inside of the print function is what we call an argument. Okay. And basically our hello string, hello world, is our argument. And so print, this is the function. Inside of the function, or inside of these parentheses, is our string data type. And inside of these parentheses, anything that's inside, we call it an argument. Okay. And this entire line itself is called a statement. Okay, so a line of code is just called a statement. This particular thing is called a print function. Inside of the parentheses, we call is an argument. Okay. And so this way, when we do this and run our program, we're able to see the output right away. Okay. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was variables. Okay, so what are variables? How do we store variables? And what do they do for us? Okay, why do we use variables? So a variable, we can say, for example, we can call it anything we want. I will go over the how to name a variable in a bit, but let's just say that we have a variable called myString, and we want to set it equal to hello world. And this itself is a string. Okay, so all we're doing is basically setting a variable called myString and setting it equal to the string called hello world. And this way, from now on and for the rest of your code and all of your other lines, myString, this variable, will represent hello world. So right after this, let's say we want to print myString. Okay, let me just go ahead and comment this out. Just so you know, these hashtags are comments and they're for humans to read, and Python actually ignores any of the words or any kind of text that is written in here. So the only thing Python will read is anything that does not have a hashtag. So let's go ahead and run this. And what you should see is hello world is printed. And the reason why is because, again, we use the print function, and inside of the print function, our argument in this case is the variable called myString. And we know from before, myString was set equal to the string called hello world. And so a little bit of a better explanation for this, I think, would be better to show a visual representation. So you can think of the variable myString or any variables as kind of like a container or a box basically. And anything that you put inside of it or set equal to, in this case we set it equal to hello world, we're basically putting it inside of that container. And so for the rest of your code, your variable myString will refer to the string hello world. That is why we're able to print myString and have it print out hello world. Okay. And the reason why we do this is because sometimes we might have a string that is very, very, very long. And in this case, we just have hello world, but for example, we can have a string that maybe is millions of letters long. And in that case, we do not want to type that inside of our argument. So for example, rather than saying all of these letters that are just super, super long, we don't want to keep having to type them every single time we use the print function. Otherwise, we'll get tired, right? We have to continue typing it, and rather than typing it, we would rather just store that entire sequence or the entire string inside of a variable so we can print it out and use it later rather than typing in the entire sequence again. So in this way, when we run this module, we can see it just prints out the entire letter, all the letters, rather than having to type out by hand the entire string. And so some common naming rules for variables. Variable names are arbitrary, but you have to make sure that you know what your variable means so you don't get confused. For example, I called this my string. I can even call it apple. It doesn't really matter as long as I refer to it as apple for the rest of the code. In this case, if you run this, you will still get the same thing. So the name of your variable doesn't really matter, but you should probably name it something that is easy to understand. For example, if I had a string called banana, right, and banana is a fruit, then we can call the variable or name the variable fruit. And this way we kind of know what's inside of it. It kind of gives you a little bit of a hint as to what is contained inside of that variable. Okay, so that is one good variable naming rule. You can also use other letters, numbers, and underscores. So for example, instead of fruit, maybe you said fruit underscore 1. That is appropriate as well to name your variable this. But the only problem is when you have, for example, a number in front, right? In this case, for variables, you are not allowed to use numbers in the front, or like when you first begin. Otherwise, it will give you an invalid syntax. So you always have to you have to remember to start with a letter, not a number. Okay. You can also do fruit 2, 3, 4, it doesn't really matter. You can also name this, for example, fruit with the F in uppercase. And Python is case sensitive. So if you have a uppercase letter here, you also have to make sure you have uppercase F for the rest of your code whenever you want to refer to the fruit variable. And you cannot use odd characters like the caret symbol, percentage sign, and so on. So for example, if you said fruit percentage and tried to print that, it will give you invalid syntax because again, you're breaking the variable naming rule. And you also should not use a name that is already a part of the Python syntax, such as the print, right? Remember earlier we discussed the print function. All it does is it prints whatever is inside of the argument onto the Python shell. So now what happens if, for example, you name banana as print and you want to print that variable called print? Let's see what happens now. It will give you that a string object is not callable. So in a short way to describe this is basically saying that you already have banana as the value for the variable called print. So now that print, this variable, is associated with the string banana, it no longer has the same function as it used to. So previously print was able to print anything inside of its argument to the shell. Now print is equal to banana. So what Python thinks you're doing is saying banana and then banana, which to it doesn't really make any sense because you basically reassigned the word or the variable print. We learned a little bit about what the print function does, how to name variables, and what variables are. So in the next video, we'll be actually talking about some of the commonly used methods associated with strings.